we're live now. So welcome everybody to our monthly webinar for the Free PGC. Before I introduce our guest speaker today, I'd just like to say a few words about the Free PGC. So the Free PGC is a non-profit organization, and the aim of it is to spread the word about the free principle worldwide. To do though, there is a lot of resources on the website, and one of those is the webinar we have today. Also, before I introduce our guest, if you want to ask questions, there is a Q&A icon on Google+. You can click on that and basically type your question, and we'll answer them as we go along. So now I'd like to introduce, I'm really happy to have Rudi Kennard with us tonight, and I'm just going to say a few words about it. Alors, Rudi first came across the free principle 11 years ago when Dr. Roger Mills and Sydney Banks came to the UK. Then 5 years ago, he co-created the freeprinciplemovie.com website with his wife Jenny in an attempt to get the understanding more globally recognized. I can highly recommend that website. He has had the honor of presenting the understanding within corporations, schools, prison, jails, addiction center, teachers, and health professionals, and has presented principle-based course in 8 different countries. With his wife Jenny, Rudi now trains others to become facilitator in this understanding through his limited company, Innate Wellbeing. So welcome, Rudi, and all to you now.
Oh, thank you. Well, the introduction to me sounded like I knew what I was doing, but it couldn't be further from the truth. So thank you so much for inviting me to talk with the Three Principles Global Community webinar. I'm very honoured and privileged to do that. So, so my gratitude to you. And again, I'm so pleased the 3PGC is in existence with their facilitator map and just everything they do. So bless all of you. So the topic, when I was asked to write about a topic, I had a good bit of a mental block. So I was like, well, how do I put something that's kind of nothing into something? So I thought, well, what's been really big for me, and I know my lifelong companion has been my internal critic. And I don't know if anyone listening, I'm guessing, I'm making the assumption that most people listening may know what I mean by that, meaning, and have lots of experience of that, is the kind of thinking we do to say you're not good enough, you can never do that, who are you to try that, don't do that, you'd never make it, you know, those kinds of thought-created instructions within your own mind. And so just to give a bit of background, I like to talk about how we create, how we create this thought creation within our own minds, what it can help us do and not do, and then how, by this understanding, I got a tremendous amount of relief from it. So it's kind of like a 3-part story, and I'm just going to do it sort of fairly concisely because I'm very, very interested more to have a discussion with the listeners. So I was brought up in a very bit like a war zone, a family war zone. My parents were always arguing, and my brother didn't talk to my sister, and my uncle didn't talk to my mum, and it was just endless arguing and conflict. And I'm making quite light of it because I can't really be bothered to go there now, but it's probably quite a toxic environment, especially for a very young, sensitive boy. And so I kind of grew up with the assumption that I wasn't good enough, I could never amount to anything, I was thick, I was stupid, I was just a waste of space, a waste of people's resources. And obviously I didn't know that wasn't true. It's just the habitual thinking that I was having coming up within my own mind. And I kind of took it to be true. I'm just going to try looking at the webcam more. There you go. And so, you know, we can do this. I mean, we can grow up in an environment, we can have cultural conditioning, and if there's enough of it, we start thinking in a similar way and believing it to be true. And this happens from our parents, from the TV, just anything in the outside world can help create an internal dialogue within our own minds. And I found this debilitating. I mean, as I was growing up, I was so shy that I couldn't talk to anybody. I was always having panic attacks where your heart would race and you'd sweat. I remember being in a social situations, and everyone was talking apart from me, and everyone was laughing and commenting naturally, and I was like a robot. I just couldn't talk to people, because as soon as I came up with something to say, my internal critic would say, "You can't say that. They'll think you're stupid. They won't understand." So as soon as I wanted to say something, the critic came in and kind of cut it off. So I would just stand there like a robot. And then I felt even worse because I hadn't said anything. So this went on to a lot of my life. And I think what happened is we develop kind of coping strategies, or I developed a coping strategy. So I used to give the impression that I was really great, I was intelligent, I was perfect, I was spiritual. It's like the anti-self-critic to do the reverse. And so it was all ego-orientated. Like, I remember on the first training with Dr. Roger Mills about 11 years ago, I was watching the video of it, and I realized I kept putting my hand up on that course and saying, yes, you know, I went hiking in the Himalayas once, and I had to try and talk. I had to get people to think I was great, to think I was spiritual, I had to be like the center of attention in the room. And I only realized how bad I was when I looked back at my first training and realized I was giving this impression of myself. It was very egotistical, and I'm sure many people thought I was a bit of a pain in the arse. But really, I was seeking external appreciation to try and drown out a lack of internal appreciation, if you will. So it was interesting when I came across the 3 principles and looked more in this direction. I remember this clearly. I was in the kitchen washing up with a friend, Jenny's auntie Sue Pankovic, and she was talking about this internal critic. And then it occurred to me, this was about 4 years ago, then it occurred to me, oh, where's mine gone? I haven't really got that anymore. I kind of stopped washing up, and I was like, where's mine gone? Like, I don't remember losing it, you know, because if you're kind of holding something in your hand and then it's not there anymore, surely you'd notice. But I didn't, and all of my lifelong companion of "you're not good enough, you're thick, you're stupid, you can't ever amount to anything, don't try that 'cause you never make it," had kind of dissolved, and I got really curious as to what happened with it. Well, all I can say is that as I started to understand the nature of how thought worked, an implication of that, it started to dissolve that kind of thinking, or in other words, the illogic of outside-in thinking, meaning that I need appreciation, I need help, I need love from something outside of myself, started to become irrelevant, because I saw the illogic that my well-being, my happiness, my good feeling is coming from my thinking in this moment, and then the next moment, and the next moment. It has nothing to do with anything outside of myself. Me seeking appreciation from something outside of myself is illogical, because my happiness, my well-being, my feeling is coming from my thinking in this moment, and then the next moment, and then the next moment. And so what kind of happened, my mind started to go towards trying to get external acceptance, and then I saw the utter futility, the utter logic of that being a solvable solution. Because if it was, it would work. And again, if you look at a lot of very famous people, celebrities, you know, rock stars, film stars, a lot of them are in rehab, and you read about them, and they're having a really tortured existence. And they've got millions of people loving them, and you know, they're winning awards, but it's not, anything outside of yourself isn't going to do it for you, because it's not what you achieve or what you do, It's what you think about what you achieve, and it's what you think about what you do that's going to give you your feeling of it. And I read a newspaper article, a female athlete just got 13 points off a world pentathlon record, and she'd actually won. She got the gold medal, but she was devastated because she hadn't got the gold medal. Now, she would innocently think that because she didn't get the gold medal, that's why she's feeling bad. But another person in her situation could feel great because they've won the gold medal. So it's not what you do, it's not what you achieve, it's how you think about it. So as I kind of journeyed along, I started to see that, wow, my thinking is included in my entire experience of life. And there's something about correcting the direction. Like, what I mean by that is when you see moment to moment, or more often moment to moment, where your experience is coming from, that your entire experience of life is from your thinking in that moment. Like, there's nothing else. There's nothing else making you feel anything apart from right now. You're thinking right now in this moment. And first of all, I started to, like I said, think, well, there's nothing outside of me that's going to do it for me, so why even bother? And the second thing is that a lot of my negative thinking, saying I can't do it, I'm not good enough, who am I to try, I'm stupid, it started dissolving, because I think it was Judith Sedgman. I apologise if it wasn't, but Judith Sedgman said at a conference, thought isn't an instruction, it's a construction. So your thinking isn't giving you an accurate representation of yourself or the world, it's giving you a construction of yourself or the world. That's how, you know, when I worked with athletes many years ago, an athlete with the same physical ability could really perform fantastically well or quite badly, because it wasn't something to do with their physical ability, it's their thinking in the moment driving their physical ability. Again, it comes down to thought. And so I think what Sydney Banks revealed to me, and is revealing to me as a huge evolutionary shift of humanity, is that as you include thought as the catalyst, as the middleman, as the missing link that brings the formless potential of mind into the form of the world that we're experiencing, it's going to happen via thought. It's like a bridge between the form and the formless is thought. Like, we can have experience of neither without thought. And when I say thought, you can actually say consciousness. You're conscious in the moment. When I say consciousness, you can say mind. You're mindful. There's an intelligence in the moment. And so as I talk about thought, I'm actually talking about mind, consciousness, and thought as one entity. They're three faces of the same thing. It's like one conscious thinking mind in this very moment is creating our entire experience of life. And so as I woke up to the nature of that, a lot of the thinking I had, saying, like, the most common one, because I remember when I was at school, I was at the bottom of my class for everything, because I'd been told I was stupid. I never even tried in lessons. I didn't even listen. I thought, there's no point, I'm stupid, I'm not going to take it in. And so I think I failed all my GCSEs, and I left school with no qualifications, and I was the bottom of my class. And so I remember the thought coming up in my head, Rudi, you're stupid. And the first time I caught it as a construction rather than an instruction, I remember looking at it and going, oh, that's interesting. That's not even true. It's just something I'm making up, and I can blame it on my parents and the past and the culture, but fundamentally I'm the one, for whatever reason, however it got in my head, I'm the one thinking and I'm the one experiencing it. And more, a lot of my internal critic would come up, and I'll see it as a construction of my mind rather than an instruction as to who I am. And so after spending, crikey, I spent 10 years of my life learning all manner of things, from mindfulness meditation to neuro-linguistic programming, which is programming the mind for success, and a whole bunch of other things. I was using my thinking to change my thinking, to get better thinking, to be aware of my thinking, to let go of my thinking. I was using thought at war with thought. But when I woke up to the nature of the three principles, I realized, oh, what happens when you get more thought? You have more thinking. And I saw the truth that when you leave thought alone, it kind of passes. Like, you don't need to do anything with thought. You don't need to do anything with a negative voice in your head. You don't need to do anything with a experience you're not enjoying, because left alone it passes by. And I thought, surely it can't be that simple. So if I get anything in my head I don't like, I leave it alone and it passes. And what I found was, when I didn't try and mind control myself or be aware of myself, it did pass quite quickly. And that led me to, when I did have an unpleasant experience created by my thinking, feeling in the moment, I just saw the illogic of doing anything with it. Like, why would I want to do anything with it? Like, it reminds me of a story that that I've heard. I don't know who said this. I think it was Keith Blevins, but he said someone asked Sydney Banks once, "What do I do when I feel insecure?" And George Pransky was with Sydney Banks, and I apologise to George if this isn't 100% accurate, but this is what I heard. And so George said to Sid, "So Sid, what do you do if you're anxious? What do you do if you're insecure?" And Sydney Banks said, "Well, I don't understand the question. Can you explain it again?" And so the guy said it again. George explained it to Sid again, and Sid said, I don't get what, I just don't understand it." So George was like, "Sid, what do you do when you're not feeling so good?" And Sid said, "Why would you want to do anything?" And I heard that story a while ago, and it didn't make any sense to me, but now I'm seeing that there is a system that works outside of what we think, outside of what we think about the system, and it moves. Thought moves along like a conveyor belt. It looks like I'm doing Tai Chi or something, but I'm not. It moves along like a conveyor belt, and when left alone, it passes, and you don't really need to do anything about it. And so the more I've kind of naturally and insightfully given up judging my experience, because if you've got an experience and you don't like the experience and want a different experience, there's judgment. Like, I feel like this and I want to be like that. So you've got a comparison between this and that. There's judgment between it. There's polarities. Well, what happens if you just have the experience and it just is? There's not really any judgment there for you to think about, for you to change or want to be different. And it kind of just passes through. And again, you know, my father passed away late last year, and I have, you know, when I think of him, I have different experiences, but I see the utter illogic of having to do anything to my experience. I see the illogic of having to do anything with my mind. There's a system that works. Like, you can't do better than God. You can't do better than this innate system that is working perfectly. And the more you try and fiddle with it, the more you get in trouble. And so, coming back to the internal critic, is I started to see that I didn't need to do anything about my internal critic, that it was a construction, that whatever experience I was having was okay as it was, good, bad, and ugly. the more I really had an experience and a feeling of that, it all just kind of passed through. And guess what happens? The good news here is that the space that was relinquished by the internal critic, wow, it drops you in, for me, I can't say this is true for everybody, but it drops you into a creative space where, for me, all I wanted to do was help alleviate suffering. I saw people suffering needlessly, so I wanted to be of service. When we're not transfixed on ourselves, on our experience, how am I doing, what does that mean, the me, for me, a natural implication of not being so internally orientated, I got externally orientated and thought, what could I do to be of service for other people? And my life went from trying to be the best and achieving stuff to a feeling of embodiment, of a richer, it's like a, I don't know, it's like a gratitude, a serenity, a peacefulness that is so much more wholesome. It's like achievement and appreciation is kind of like a band-aid you can put on a wound. Whereas this feeling I'm talking about, that you are, when there's less of you on your own mind, is like the human immune system that's natural and just works, and there's like a deeper healing there. And that's pretty much allowed me to create what I've created so far, and I'm literally just scratching the surface of what I'm going to be doing in this lifetime with the 3 principles. We're planning all sorts of things in the future. But I realise I've been talking a lot, and if people have questions, I much prefer that, and then I could really, I don't know, hone in on more points or anything else really.
Let me remind people how they can ask questions. If you're on Google, the Google Plus page where you watch it from, you should be able to access the Q&A feature and type your questions. So if you have any questions, type them, and then we'll be able to answer them as they come along. Thank you. Don't be shy. Go ahead. Don't have any yet, but we might have a bit later.
I think what was really, I'll keep nattering, and hopefully someone will ask a question. I think what's really helpful for my own understanding with this is that for so long I tried to work out, how can I trust my wisdom and not my habitual thinking? What is intuition and what is conditioned thought? How can I go with the flow of life and not resist it? Like, I was splitting thought into like good thinking and bad thinking, if you will. When I saw that Sid was talking about a whole principle, he wasn't talking about content, he wasn't talking about right and wrong, high and low, good and bad. The power that allows us to think, the force that allows us to think and be conscious and be alive, is a whole principle. It creates the good, the bad, it creates the highs, the lows, it creates the intuition, habitual thinking. It's all the same thing. And I think now is the question, what's wisdom and what isn't, seems illogical, because you're just in experience, and I don't really judge my thinking as good and bad, high and low, wisdom, non-wisdom. It's a red herring for me. I tend to find when I'm thinking less about my thinking, rather I'm just thinking and I'm experiencing, there's a way in which you could define it. You're following your wisdom. You're more in touch with your intuition. You're more in the flow of life naturally. but it doesn't involve thinking. It doesn't involve thinking about it. It doesn't involve categorizing and filing thinking as good, bad, high, low, intuition, non-intuition. It's just the way in which you see thought as a whole principle, as all thought. It just moves you. It just kind of moves you in life to do wonders and things you didn't think were possible. It's, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but I think Sid was talking about before, because you can have high-level thinking and low-level thinking. You can have a wise thought and a negative thought, but it's still all after the fact of the power of thought. The power of thought can allow somebody to perform a miracle that can save thousands of lives, and the power of thought can allow people to commit mass genocide. It's all one. It's not good and bad, it's just what is. It's just neutral. Neutral meaning that gravity is neutral. Things just go down. It doesn't have an opinion on what goes down and what doesn't go down. Everything just goes down on this planet. And thought is the power to allow us to think anything we want, and we can do anything with our thinking, good and bad. So as I saw the absolute wholeness of thought, what happened? I stopped splitting thinking into good and bad and wisdom and non-wisdom, because it's still after the fact of the power of thought. And when I didn't have thinking about my thinking, I was more able to just navigate through life without that on my mind. And you talk to any sports person when they've been in the flow, they're not thinking a lot. They're just experiencing like children almost. They're just enjoying what they're doing. It's kind of effortless. And so I've had a lot more of that since my internal critic has kind of dissolved. And boy, am I grateful for that.
People are very quiet tonight. They're just in a nice place, I think. That's why they don't ask any questions. I'm going to ask you questions, because as I also share the free principle. Sometime when you share with people that never heard about the free principle, and talking about, you know, the nature of thought and the power of thought, there is some people have a tendency to try to attach it to something else they know, and ask you, well, what should I do, and how can I change my thinking? Okay? So I have my answer on that, but I like you maybe to give, you know, your insight on that, if you don't mind.
Well, the good thing about changing thinking is that thinking changes by itself. For instance, if you've ever felt really loving towards somebody or something, at some stage, it could be a second, minute, hour later, you don't feel as loving. Things change. You know, even if sometimes you feel angry about something, without you trying to change your anger, you kind of calm down. And so this system works. It moves through your consciousness. So we don't need to worry about changing thinking. But what we do is get in the way of it happening naturally. It's a bit like if you've got a river and you're just watching it, it will kind of keep flowing down in front of you, flowing down, flowing down. But when we think we can make the river run better, we can actually, it's like us throwing a dam into the river and kind of holding the stream up. At some stage it will burst through, but you've held the water up. And so I think the thing about changing thought is understanding the nature of how it works is going to be a lot more helpful to people, because you have between 60 and 120,000 thoughts a day, and trying to change those or control those is incomprehensible. You're just never going to do it. But understanding the nature of them, so they become more of you see them more of a construction than an instruction to life, allows you to have them, but they don't really have any effect on you. Because I'm realizing now, talking about it, my internal critic that was so strong, it's like a demon in my ear telling me that I can't do anything at all. I still heard that voice initially, but instead of it being like on loudspeakers, it kind of turned into a tiny little gnat kind of talking to me in a high-pitched voice. It lost its power. I was still getting the thinking, but you see it as thought rather than something that is true. And you wake up to the nature of thought, and you naturally glide through your life in a construction of your own mind rather than an instruction as to what the hell's going on.
Thank you, Rudi. So we have one comment and one question. I'll start with the comment. The comment is, I start to type questions, but as I do, I answer my own questions. I love the three principles. So that's the comment. She's lovely. And the question is, how do you deal with the day-to-day interactions with the outside in the world, politicians, medical practices, etc.? I suppose I don't have the end. Do you want me to repeat, or you're okay with that?
So how do I deal with the outside world?
Yeah, I think it's how do you deal with the day-to-day interaction with the outside world, like politicians, medical practices, and some others, I suppose.
I'll probably need him to be a bit more specific, like what that means.
Okay.
I can give it a go talking about it, but if he...
Then if you want to, Rudi is going to answer. If you want to add anything, just feel free to type something more. And then we can answer. Yeah?
So how do I deal with the outside world, my interactions? I think I don't. I'm just in the experience of my thinking at the moment, and it guides me through. But it's nothing that I'm doing. There's nothing that I have to do or not do. And I create an opinion about medical practices or politicians, but I know their opinions. It's just left me with whatever I think. I know that I'm creating it. It's a construction of my own mind. It isn't necessarily true. It could be helpful, but it's still not necessarily true for everybody. So what it's left me with is an absolute 100% confidence and certainty. I know without a shadow of a doubt that whatever I think is going to look real, and I know I'm going to feel it. How that works, the powers that allows that to happen, I have no idea about. You could call that God if you will. I have no idea. But I know, like I know that whatever I think I'm going to feel is going to look true. That I can say for certain. What I make up from that power, my opinions, I know are going to be personal beliefs, so I treat them more lightly.
Thank you, Rudi. So we have next question. How do you recognize that you are caught up in your thinking? That's a big one.
So could you say that again?
How do you recognize that you are caught up in your thinking?
To be honest, my old answer would have been I know by the feeling I'm in. But Rudi in March 2015 would say, I don't mean this to be pedantic, but I don't really care if I'm caught up in my thinking or not. Like if I'm caught up in my thinking, I'm caught up in my thinking. It's not like a bad thing. It's not something that I shouldn't do. I'm caught up in my thinking, and then I'm not, and then I am, and then I'm not. It's like the dance of life. You go between seeing how thought works, meaning that you see how your thinking is giving you an experience of the outside world and everybody else, rather than the outside world giving you experience. It's coming through thought. Then I forget and I blame it on the outside world. I dance between both. I dance between a system that is 100% true that it works inside out and an illusion that it works like it doesn't. But I'm okay with dancing. There's nothing wrong with it. We all do it. It's as soon as you make it an issue that you shouldn't get caught up in your thinking, what are you doing? You're judging your experience, wanting it to be different, berating yourself because you're doing it, which kind of puts a dam in the river. And so I'm absolutely fine to just get caught in my thinking. I don't really notice it, and then I'm out of it again. It's not a problem at all.
Thank you. I think there is a follow-up question from the same person, so I'm going to do it at the same time. Are you saying that if and when we stop judging our thoughts so much, our habitual thinking tends to stop?
Yeah, pretty much. I think for me that was true, because I mean, I know this sounds far too simple, but if you just have thought, you're just having thought and you're moving through your experience. As soon as you think about your thinking, as soon as you, another word of saying, when you're judging your experience, meaning you want it to be different, you want it to pass quicker, that you feel you shouldn't be having it, that you should know better, etc., etc., etc. When you're thinking about your thinking, you've immediately got a judgment, a split. You're splitting thought into two, and there's judgment, there's blame, there's criticism there. You have more thought. You can then be judgmental about you being judgmental about your thinking. Can you see it gets more and more complicated? It's like having a one-store building, and all of a sudden you've got a high rise of thoughts. And so, yeah, I don't know who said that, but I loved whoever wrote that, because as soon as you see the nature of thought, you do immediately stop judging yourself, or certainly a lot less.
That was Jonathan.
Well done, Jonathan.
So we have another question from Barbara. Thank you, Rudi. I'm noticing that being new to the principle, as a therapist with 32 years of experience, I'm so insecure in sessions, bubbling about what to say and how to say it. I'm thinking it helped to have coaching as I go through this transition. That's kind of a question statement.
Yeah, I mean, if you're actively trying to help other people get this as a coach or a therapist, I would highly recommend talking to somebody that you resonate with, because it's just helpful to be able to articulate this in a way that's really relevant to the people that you're talking to, and with clarity to really help people. So I think that's a great idea.
Thank you. So I have one from Daniel. Could you speak more about moving beyond your inner critic? As much as I have learned about the principle, I am still very much stuck with my desire to know more, to connect with my deeper self, to help me navigate relatively difficult circumstances.
Well, this is going to sound very strange, but so you have to bear with me. We don't really have a self. We have a thought construct of who we think we are, but it's constructed via thought. That is how one moment you can think you're the best person on the earth, the next moment you can think you're a lousy waste of space. That's why one minute you can look in the mirror and think you look great, another minute you look in the mirror and think you look awful. That's how sometimes you think your business is going to be a huge success, and then the next minute your business is going to be, you're going to go bankrupt. Like, our opinions of ourselves in the world changes. That's how you can think of one person, maybe a family member, and when you think back to all the different experiences you've had of them, that, oh, I love them, oh no, I hate them, but oh, they're annoying, oh, they're endearing. Like, just one person in your life, you've had all manner of different experiences of them via thinking in the moment, giving you an experience of them. And so what was helpful for me in my inner critic is I realized, oh my goodness, there's not even a Rudi. Like, I have thinking about this persona or character of Rudi giving me an experience of Rudi, but it's not really true, because I used to be so shy I couldn't talk to people, and now I talk to hundreds of people. Like, so where's this Rudi? Because if I was so shy I couldn't talk to people, how can I talk to hundreds of people now? I think of the Rudi that I couldn't talk to girls when I was young. I was terrified of women. I was so shy that I just couldn't talk to women. Now I'm married to one. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, where's the Rudi gone there that couldn't talk to him, and now I love women, I love my wife? So we haven't really got a self that is stable. We don't have a stable self. What we have is thoughts giving us an experience of what we think and who we think we are in the moment, and that is very, very changeable. Now, answering the question, because I'm doing this in a long-winded kind of way, as I saw the non-self, or in other words, as I saw that, wow, we just have thinking giving us an experience, the sense of self started to dissolve, and it's almost like you wake up to, you see through the veil of self to the force, the power, the principles, the God, the nature, the life force that's allowing you to create an opinion of this self, allowing you to create an opinion of the world. There's this spiritual or formless, intangible intelligence behind all things, powering us up to be conscious and to think and be alive. Now that I can say is watertight and stable and a constant. What I make up and create with that power is not going to be a constant. So funnily enough, as soon as I dropped Rudi Kennard as something that was true and looked to a deeper truth behind Rudi Kennard, the force that was allowing me to create Rudi Kennard, that truth just did everything for me, because it's stable and it's a constant and it's secure and it can't be broken and it doesn't go anywhere and it doesn't change.
Thank you, Rudi. Del will ask about how to deal with interaction with the outside world. He just added a comment on it. You know, he talked about politicians and medical practices, and what he said, most of the suggestions might be wrong. I think it was a question, how do you deal with those type of things when you think their suggestion is wrong?
Yeah, well, I think what was helpful is seeing separate realities, that this power that I'm talking about gives us the free will to create anything with it. Thought is the creator. And, you know, I've looked a lot, for instance, this is all personal belief here from Rudi the persona, but I've looked a lot into health and well-being and see the logic of a lot of drugs and a lot of what the medical science do. And I apologize to anyone who disagrees with me. I'm not saying I'm right, I'm just saying I'm creating this at the moment. And, you know, like we had a friend, for instance, who had cancer, who completely healed herself of cancer, but then my mum got cancer, had chemotherapy, and died of chemotherapy, but it wasn't actually the cancer that killed her, it's the drugs and chemotherapy. Now, some people can have chemotherapy and they survive and they're fine, others have it and then they die, so I'm not saying you should or you shouldn't, because again, that's belief. But I'm just saying that we have to be aware that what people don't think like us, like the medical industry and politicians and infrastructures, they have kind of like a shared thought, if you will. A business, you can call that the culture of the company. They have like a shared global thought. Like the medical industry has I guess a shared thought maybe that we're more machine-like, that we don't have consciousness, that chemicals can help heal us. Maybe that's an overarching thought of the medical industry. My thinking is very different from that. And again, I'm not saying one's right and one's wrong. I'm just saying that what was really helpful to me is realizing that I cannot do anything useful in the world if it's going to come from revenge and judgment and blame and hatred. But I do know that I can see other realities, other thinking, and I can do my best to help the world from a space of love and compassion and understanding that's much more powerful. Because I realized all of my problems in my life with other people, taking this kind of more personally, have been because I've wanted them to think like me. It was shocking when I realized this, that if only my mum, my brother, my friend, my manager would think like me, then we'll get on, then it'll be fine. But the thing is you've got 7.2 billion people walking around expecting other people to think like them. Because of the nature of mind, conscious, and thought, is that whatever you think is going to look true to you. It's going to look real, and it's going to look like you're on it. You've got it down. You know the truth. But what happens is, in actuality, is that you have thinking and it looks real. It doesn't mean to say it is real. It just looks real to you. And so, instead of sharing differences and conflicts, you can actually see separate realities. People think different, and it's going to transcend into a big organization or culture, but it doesn't really have to bother you. If you have an issue with other people thinking different and you want to do something about it in the world, great, but it doesn't have to affect you.
Thank you, Rudi. There's an interesting question. There may be a real or true self, but in one sense, do we have contact or access with it? You want me to repeat it?
Yeah, thanks.
There may be a real or true self, but in what sense do we have contact or access with it?
Oh, that's a great question.
It's from Eric.
Oh, thanks, Eric. That's lovely. I love that. There may be a real self, but do it. So for me, again, I personally don't see that there's a true self and then there's a non-true self. I don't see that we have this spiritual essence and then we have a physical essence. I just see that this same one truth, this same one constant, this same one power, you can call mind, conscious, and thought, whatever word you want to use, is animating us in the form. And then we go back to formless, and then we're back in the form again, like it's all one thing, which is nothing. And I don't really think about true self and non-true self, because you've split one thing into two and it's actually one. We've got this animating force that allows us to be aware, allows us to be conscious, and allows us to be alive. That power you could call your true self, if you will. But for me, there's a physical component. There's the persona of Rudi. We have this physical body. We have crappy habitual thinking. It's all the true self in disguise. This one true self, all it means for me is that when I have less on my mind, meaning I'm seeing the nature of my mind more, I'm automatically more in alignment with something far powerful than I could possibly put words to. And in alignment with that, I do things in the outside world that are really helpful to be of service. And other times I don't, and I get egotistical and I think of myself a lot. I go between both of them. But again, I can't split one thing into two and say there's a true self and there's a non-true self. We have the illusion of a non-true self, but it doesn't really exist. There's just one thing that exists and everything's part of it.
Thank you, Rudi. So we have also Barbara she's added something to her question about, getting coaching and sharing the principle. She said, to add to my question, when I begin to suggest to people that their experience is coming from the inside, I'm getting a lot of pushback. And I guess she's looking for some help or tip.
Well, I think that's quite a common thing, and it's a great question, because globally we're taught that our experience is coming from something other than our thinking. We're taught that our experience is coming from something outside of ourselves. If only I hadn't lost my job, I wouldn't feel depressed. If only my children would behave themselves, I wouldn't feel as anxious. If only I had job security, I'll feel secure. So it does look like life works that way. So when you try and tell people it works the other way around, you're gonna get people saying, no, I don't like that. It's a bit like on The Matrix, when, I don't know if you guys have seen The Matrix, but Neo wakes up from The Matrix, which is an illusion, into the real world. Like, he kind of has a bit of a freak out initially. So what you're doing is you're steering people away from an illusion. I'm not saying the outside world's an illusion. I'm saying the way in which it works, meaning that the outside is making you feel something. Now, that is an illusion. When you point people to the fact of how life actually works from the inside out, and has always worked that way and will always continue to work that way, you're going to get people not liking that very much, because you're kind of destroying their belief systems. But when you point to the practical logic that, I know, like, for instance, on my course recently, I played a music track. I played rock music, and I played classical music, and I played kind of, it's kind of like reggae or something. People had different experiences of the same music. Like, when I played the rock music, out of 20 people, 3 people put their hands up and said, I love this music. 17 said, I hate it. Now, if it was the outside world making us feel something, surely that music would make people feel the same, but it doesn't, because people have a different experience of music. And so it's our thinking about the music giving us an experience of the music. It's not the music. I think if you can put it in practical terms or relevant to them, within their own life and within their own work, make it just really down to earth, I think people start to see the logic of how this works and how it would be logical to work any other way.
Okay. Another question from Jonathan. How do you help people disengage from their thinking to allow them to get a glimpse of the principles? There are a lot of rational people out there.
I generally use a big spade, and I smack them over the head. No, I'm only joking. Well, the thing is, you can't, but what you can do, if you've got a rational person, now this is really interesting, because the 3 principles are incredibly rational. Like, again, the last group I spoke to, I said, hands up here who isn't alive. No hands up. Hands up here who doesn't think anything, ever. No hands up. Hands up here who isn't conscious of my voice or conscious of anything in the room right now. No hands. So you've got these 3 powers that are true for everybody. They're rational, they're watertight, they're constant, they're relevant to people. Again, I'm not saying you should do that or use it as a technique. I'm just saying how I've done it, and it's made sense to me in that moment. There's no kind of what you should and shouldn't do. And people find their own ways of pointing to the truth of how the 3 principles work. And again, when you talk about thought being included in experience, like I said about the music, you can use all manner of examples of that, but I tend to find the most rational people are the people who get a sense of this quite quickly, because they're looking for something that is validated, that is true. And what separates the three principles from a lot of other stuff is you're looking at fundamental truths or constants that work the same for everybody all the time, everywhere. We all think, we're all conscious, we're all alive, mind, conscious, and thought. As soon as you start peppering it with personal beliefs about stuff, then that's not going to be true for people. And again, I can 100% say that whatever we think, we feel, and you can have a conversation with somebody about that so they rationalize how that works. But if I said that women feel this and men feel that, or Afro-Caribbean people think this and Norwegian people think that, okay, I'm putting personal belief into it, so it's not going to be true for everybody. But the fact that we think is true for everybody. So I'm being long-winded again, but there's a way in which you can talk about this very, very simply and practically that appeal to people's rationality.
Thank you, Rudi. I think we have time for one more questions before we wrap up. So Eric asks, cannot drugs such as herbs and medications help people change their thinking for a while if they can't change it otherwise, and therefore be good tools, training wheels as it were, that become crutches if used too long in some circumstances?
Absolutely. I mean, as far as the three principle approach to that, there is no three principle approach. Like, the three principles doesn't have an opinion on anything. It's like asking gravity its opinion whether it's going to drop this mouse or this pen, which one does it want to drop? It doesn't have an opinion, it just works, things go down. And so as far as drugs, what I can say for certainty is that if you put things into your physical body, it's going to elect a chemical response, and that is going to have an effect on your thinking. So we can't say what effect it will have, but we can say that the powers of mind, conscious, and thought is going to give you a different experience. But the principles doesn't have an opinion whether that's right or wrong. It's just that we feel what we think. Like, you know, I had really bad toothache the other day. So physiologically I was in a lot of pain, and I was thinking pain, so I was feeling pain. It's excruciating. Then I watched a movie that I really got into, and when I was watching the movie, I actually forgot that I was in pain, and I wasn't in pain. As soon as it finished, I was in pain again. So your thinking is included in physiology. Your thinking is giving you an experience of what you take into your body. Your thinking is giving you an experience of your pain. Like, your thinking is giving you all experience in the moment via mind, conscious, and thought. So I don't know if that's helpful. I'm just trying to read the question. So, are they good tools or not good tools? It depends on what you want to use them for, and trusting your own judgment, really. There's no like opinion in the three principles that you should or you shouldn't. It's just what shows up in the moment could be helpful or may not be helpful. You just have to kind of give it a go and see what happens.
Thank you, Rudi. I'm just going to answer. Eric asked something about, I would like to share these with others. Will it be online afterwards? Yes, you will receive a replay link, Eric, a replay link from the YouTube page. So you'll be able to, you know, take the link and make it listen to whoever you want to. So no problem. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rudi, for your time and for a very full of various questions and, you know, webinar. It was very interesting. Different approach on things. That's quite good. Thank you so much. And thank you for everybody watching, and for everybody that will probably watch the replay later. And Rudi, thanks so much again for being our host, our guest speaker tonight. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody, and see you next month.